Welcome to the Coach Dave Love podcast with NBA shooting coach Dave Love and your host, Matt Robertson, exploring the cutting edge of evidence-based shooting development in basketball today, from shooting form to skill acquisition to shot metrics. This is the Coach Dave Love podcast.
Welcome to the Coach Dave Love podcast. I am your host, Matt Robertson, and with me, as always, NBA shooting coach Dave Love. Dave, what the heck are you doing in a hotel room today?
I am still in Ottawa, Canada, not a week later, for the people that are listening to the podcast in order and on the day that they're released. But we're recording two podcasts in one evening because we just like hanging out that much. So I had sold out clinics today. I have two sold out clinics tomorrow in Ottawa. I head home. I've got a big opportunity that I might be talking about later next week. And then I'm back in Toronto, Canada for some clinics on November 15 to 17, I believe. Can we talk about those dates for a second? We're going to go a little off topic if we do.
Love it.
Are you okay to discuss this? I went to book my hotel rooms for Toronto, and the hotels that I usually stay at are like if I stay by the airport, it's maybe $250 per night. If I stay downtown, it's maybe more closer to $300. This week, $1,200 to $1,900 for like moderately priced, like not Four Seasons. I'm not that kind of guy yet. I'm a like Sheraton / Marriott guy, and $1,900 a night for the downtown Marriott. Do you have any idea why?
If I had to guess, if you put my entire bank account at risk, I would say Travis Kelce's coming to town. Is that true?
Yes, you are exactly right. Yeah, Taylor Swift is in town that weekend, and immediately my youngest daughter's reaction was, "Oh, I'm so jealous." Like, so have I told you my Taylor Swift story? It's not a very good story, but so my youngest daughter is a big Taylor Swift fan. My oldest daughter is a little bit of a Taylor Swift fan. I'm also a little bit of a Taylor Swift fan. But when I worked for the Orlando Magic, one of my first trips in season, I met the team in Toronto, and then I joined the team on a road game against the Knicks. And on Celebrity Row was Justin Long, the Apple guy from back in the day, or I think he was in a couple of movies that were of some significance, Howard Stern, and Taylor Swift. So I still, like, she was a star at this point, but, and Kate Upton was there, the Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. And so Taylor Swift was a star. She wasn't the gigantic star that she is now, but she was a star. Everybody knew who she was. And I now joke, like, Taylor Swift's come to see me work. So I owe it to her to go see her work at some point. And unfortunately, I can't afford to do that and can't get the tickets to do it. But I joke with my daughter all the time. Oh, yeah, Taylor, she's come to see me work, or we've been in the same room. Sure, the room was big enough for 20,000 people, and we were on opposite sides, but we've been in the same room, and we can make that argument.
Those are details. Those are details that don't matter, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's resulted in, and so I'm staying in a not particularly nice hotel, not anywhere near where I need to be, and it's still $350 a night, and so yeah, I'm a big deal.
So here's what you're going to do is you're going to be checking the apps on those nights just around showtime, just to see if you can sneak in the door for anywhere near face value 12 minutes before the show.
Yeah, and that Monday morning you see well, it's not going to be on the news, but a 14-year-old girl has murdered her dad in Calgary, Canada, because he went to Taylor Swift without her. Yeah, she's a sweetheart of a girl, but man, would she absolutely kill me.
But Taylor Swift and I have worked together. It's like cool. Obama and I also watched a basketball game together, just from 180 rows apart. But we did watch it together, right?
Exactly.
Okay, Dave, that's a delightful little departure. Let's get us back on track here. Today's episode is I want to can't even think of a fancier way to say the nerdiest episode that we've done thus far. Is that true?
And we're going to go a lot nerdier than this, but this is going to be our gateway into nerddom, basketball nerddom, and I can't wait for it. You're almost going to decide the name of the episode based on like how you kind of refer to it in the early stages of the podcast. I need you to understand that.
Oh no. Okay. This is Nerd Talk with Matt and Dave. The official title of so we want to drive you quickly. If you're interested in this topic, Dave has a blog on his website, and the place to find that is coachdavelove.com/category/blogs, and you can find a blog with this topic. The topic that we're going to be covering is quantifying stability in basketball, the science behind optimal stance width. Like the decimal points of foot width. Okay, go for it.
Yeah, let's now take that super scientific, super unrelatable blog title, and let's make it. What are we talking about here, Maddie?
Oh man,
put it in simple terms for the people.
Yeah, plug the calculator in and show me how wide my feet should be.
Yeah, foot width, foot positioning. But it's not going to be opinion and experience based. This is going to be opinion and experience supported by science and supported by this part of our shot. A couple of parts of our shot are just plain physics. And when we can understand the physics, then we can use that to our advantage to become better shooters. So in this episode, we're going to talk about some of the physical things that a player can do to help them stop negative energy, help them stop momentum. And I think we should probably start by identifying what the heck positive energy and negative energy are.
Just before we get going, in our pre-show meeting, you said biomechanist, and I was like, biomechanic? We're already flirting with the edges of my IQ rating, to be honest.
Really? The word biomechanist? No. Like a person who is a biomechanist, that caused you to pause for a second?
Well, I was like, I read it. I always read it as biomechanic. Well, like I have a car mechanic that's spelled the same way, and so why would the biomechanic not be said the same as my car mechanic? Anyway,
good, fair enough point. And and again, this leads us into I'm not an expert. There's things on the blog that, if I'm being totally honest, the math and the actual explanation of the science is a little bit beyond my expertise. Like the math for sure. The science, if you had said to me no, Dave, explain to me how the moment arm and the inverted pendulum concept were, I'd go, not let me put it in a basketball context. And I feel like let's acknowledge that's where most of us need to play, is that we don't need to understand necessarily the science of it. We need to understand the basketball application of it. So if you want a little more of the science, go to the blog on coachdavelove.com. If you just want to know, I'm a basketball coach and I got to understand what I need to know about the science to help my players, then you're in the right spot.
So Dave, why does stance width matter? Let's start there. So let's start at the beginning.
Let's start with positive and negative power. What do I mean by that? So I've explained it a couple of times, but this may be your first podcast, so I'll explain it again. Positive energy is the energy that your body creates as a shooter that is flowing either along the target line towards the hoop or straight up in the air. if your body only creates those directions of energy as you're shooting, then that's the directions of energy you give to the basketball. You will get the ball to go up and straight. Those are the directions we want the ball to go. Negative energy is energy that flows any other direction, is flowing away from the hoop in some way. Even if it's just 1 degree offline of at the hoop, it's negative energy. We want to try and reduce that as if we possibly can. So when we're moving on the floor as a basketball player, trying to find open space in order to shoot, we're probably going to be moving in a negative direction. We're probably going to be moving any other direction except for straight at the hoop. And because we're moving that direction, it's negative energy. If we don't stop that energy, then it will continue to flow. And as we're into the shooting motion and we're still moving in the direction that we were cutting, we're probably going to give that energy to the basketball. And now the ball is not going to move towards the hoop, but move in the direction that our body is moving. And we will either miss offline or have to make a compensating move in the opposite direction. So if you're drifting to the right baseline, you're moving to your right. If you don't stop that energy, your body continues to move to the right, and you either miss to the right or you have to push the ball back to the left with some other part of our body to try and cancel the first move out. And that's, in reality, going to happen. We just want to work to reduce that as much as we possibly can on each shot that we take.
So the kids, if there's any players listening to this, and Coach Dave, my favorite player, shoots fadeaways all the time. Are you saying that's negative? Like, talk a little bit more about that for me, just for a second.
Yeah. So we shoot a fadeaway or we shoot an off-balance shot because a defender forces that. A defender sort of won or slightly had an advantage in this fight between the shooter and the defender. And they were able to get the shooter into a less balanced position, which therefore creates most likely negative energy away from the hoop, which then forces a compensating move in the opposite direction, which makes their shot more complicated. What the shooter should be doing is trying to get as close to shooting a free throw, where there's hopefully little to no negative energy being created in a hard situation. Where you're not going to be able to do exactly that, but we want to get as close to that simple movement where only positive energy is created as much as we possibly can. And then making that movement of, like, most young male players in particular will sort of lean their shoulders back, negative energy is working backwards, rotate right shoulder forward, left shoulder back even more. Now they're tilted off line and kick the right foot out to counterbalance themselves. And we got a whole bunch of energy as a right-handed shooter, typically going back and left. Well, if we got energy from our body going back and left, something else has got to go right and forward and to compensate. And you've just increased the amount of negative energy, increased the amount of energy that's pushing the ball away from the rim, hoping that they're each going to cancel each other out. And you can do it. It's just the more we do it, the harder it is to sync all that stuff up. And we don't want to shoot essentially what are fadeaway shots unless a defender forces it. We don't want to do it just out of habit.
So, Dave, you're telling me that more balanced is better.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Okay. Thanks for coming out. Just setting the record straight, because you're going to refer to positive and negative energy throughout the course of the podcast. It's important to establish what those items are for the listeners.
Yeah. Should we also talk about some of the other terms that we're going to discuss and just sort
this
of
is going
define
to
those?
be absolutely. This is kind of a fun part for me. And I honestly, again, we are nothing but transparent on this podcast. I have the list open next to me because this is all sort of been beyond me.
Yeah. And so my open transparency, there's going to be one on this list that either Matt is going to skip over or I'm going to dodge, because it's very science-based. And I get it just enough as a coach to explain the practicalities of the idea, but I don't understand it enough as a scientist to explain the science part of it. Some of these things I do. Some of this one particular, Matt doesn't skip over it. And now I feel like you're not allowed to skip over it. I'll point out the one that I'm like, okay, I'm a nerd, but I'm not that big a nerd.
I have an idea of what it is, and I'm going to mention it in a little bit. Okay. First one, center of mass. Let's talk center of mass.
Center of mass, and we can, I'll take the bullet out of your chamber and just say, like, we might also refer to this as center of gravity. And this is essentially the spot in the human body kind of around the belly button where there's equal amounts of mass on both sides, side to side, forward to back, up and down. And so what's important to understand about the center of mass is we want the center of mass moving in positive directions if we can, up and at the target. If your center of mass is moving sideways, then that can get you off balance or generate negative energy. And if your center of gravity, is moving sideways, then as you are snapping your wrist at the target, your hand is probably moving sideways as well. Your center of gravity is going to pull your arm because, shocker, everything is connected in the human body. I don't know if you knew that.
This has been Human Anatomy with Matt and Dave. Okay, base of support. What is that for us?
Base of support is a fancy way of saying the width of your feet. So in the human body, in a shooting stance, your base is your feet. And so we're essentially saying, how wide are your feet?
Okay. This is the one I think that you were talking about, moment arm.
Moment arm. Okay, this has some. I'm gonna try. This is not gonna go real well. This is good, and we're gonna get. I hope we get some physicist or somebody who like say, "Hey, Dave, not even close. Good try, not even close." But moment arm, as I understand it, is the essentially if we take the center of gravity around your belly button, and we draw lines out to the outside of your feet, the widest part of your base of support. I believe those lines are the moment arms. I'm not even totally confident. But there's a practical part of this that we'll get to in this podcast that as basketball, that's what we need to understand. I don't need to, again, I'm just trying to make this relatable for everybody. We don't need to know everything. I'm challenging myself to learn as much as I possibly can, and there's certain things that I still don't get. Maybe I'll understand the moment arm later on, but for right now, it's a little outside of my grasp, and this is how I'm trying to challenge myself to grow.
Awesome. Those are the majority of the terms that I think that were unusual to me as I was going through the subject matter. We may find a few more, but I'll ask you to clarify if we get to something that I don't understand. Dave, let's take a super quick break, and then we're going to get into a real world example of what matters, why this matters to us.
Hey there, basketball fans. Coach Dave Love here with an exciting opportunity to revolutionize your shooting game. Introducing my exclusive shot development systems, Pure Release, Consistency and Balance, and Fluidity and Arc. Each system is designed to target key aspects of your shooting technique, transforming you into a more effective player on the court. Pure Release focuses on perfecting your shot release. Consistency and Balance enhances your stability and accuracy, and Fluidity and Arc works on your ball path and trajectory of your shot. Find out the drills and progressions that I use with my NBA players to improve these important habits. Can't decide which one to choose? No worries, grab the bundle and get all three systems at a fantastic value. It's a complete package to elevate every part of your shooting game. And there's a special deal for all my podcast listeners. Use the promo code PODCAST20 at checkout to save 20% on any of the shot development systems. Don't miss this chance to train like the pros. Visit CoachDaveLove.com/store and take your first step towards shooting success. That's CoachDaveLove.com/store.
Welcome back. Normally, Coach Dave, we do an ATO here, and an ATO for, if you're a first-time listener, is an after timeout. And so after a timeout, we drop a play, we put 24 up on the thought clock, and Coach Dave concisely has to nail down an important piece from the last segment. But because we haven't really covered anything, Dave, I just want you to reiterate what you just said. This is a challenging topic that is relatable to a lot of people. You don't need to know all of the science. However, this is the backdrop. This is important to at least have some foundation in, right? Pun intended, I guess.
If you're coaching 8-year-olds, then I want you to understand the broadest of broad strokes out of this. And if you are using this concept to build a bridge that cars will be driving across, really dive into this a lot more than I have. The consequences are far greater. And so depending on what kind of level you're at as a coach, you may need to just understand the broad strokes. You may need to be able to dive a little bit deeper. You may need to dive really deep and start to challenge yourself a little bit more. And just continue to work to grow as a coach.
When you said build a bridge, I thought you were talking metaphorically.
No.
Nope.
In that case, I was talking literally build a bridge. Please build a safe one. Since that's unlikely to be happening within the dozens of listeners that we have. Maybe it wasn't the best analogy, but
dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
We dodged a bullet then, if that's the case. Okay. Coach Dave, real world example. Let's talk about a 7-footer versus a 5'5" person. Okay, let's start with the 7-footer.
Okay. With the 7-footer, okay, let's imagine both those people are standing face to face. And so they each put their feet wide apart according to the 5'5" person. Okay. That person puts what they think their feet wide apart is. The 7-footer matches their width. Because the distance between the floor and the center of mass is so much longer for the 7-foot person, they have a much smaller window. And I believe that might be the moment arm. That as that shifts, even though their feet are the same width apart, they're not the same width apart relative to their body. And so relative to their body, that 7-footer only needs to move a smaller distance in order to get their body off balance. So here's what I want everybody to do. If you're in a place where you can stand up while you're listening to the podcast, please do so. Okay? Get on your feet, stand with your feet touching, your feet really close together. So that the insteps are touching. Then kind of put your finger on your center of gravity around your belly button. And with your other hand, kind of put your hand above where the outside of your foot would be. Okay? Now I want you to shift your center of gravity over towards your hand. And you will find that moment where your center of gravity gets outside the widest part of your feet is when you're going to start to fall over. That if you didn't move your feet, you would fall on the floor. Okay? The narrower your feet, the shorter the distance your center of gravity needs to move in order to get outside the base of support. If you can get your feet wider, so let me go back. If my feet are touching, then I probably only need to move my center of gravity 2 or 3 inches, and I'm outside the base of support, and I start to fall over. I'm out of control of my body. There's energy being created away from the rim that I'm not in control of, and I might give that to the basketball when I'm shooting. All we have to do is get our feet wider apart. Now you have a much greater distance that you have to get your center of gravity shifted over in order to get outside the widest part of your base. You have a larger window within which you can be stable. And the larger window means you can absorb more momentum. You can cut harder and still be in control of your body when you land, so that you can stop the negative energy that you created in the cut and try to create positive energy in the shooting motion.
So this is great. We're going to take another lap of this also, and I'm going to use your terminology, and you can tell me how I do, okay?
Okay, I love this.
So my stability margin, which is the word we talked about earlier, when you talked about moment arm, you said my belly button is the top point, and then my feet are the sort of bottom edges of the triangle, sort of the outside of my feet.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know that I have the moment arm correct. So let's not focus too much on the moment arm, but
let's not use that terminology. Okay, so if the triangle is my belly button and the outside of my feet, if my belly button gets to a point where I'm a right angle, so I'm straight up and down, I'm teetering within my stability margin because I'm inside the base of support, but only just barely.
Right.
As soon as that goes to an open angle triangle at the bottom and I'm beyond my base of support, I start to fall down. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
I love it.
Was that more convoluted than what you said? Probably.
Yeah, but okay, let's talk about cues for a second, because maybe my way made sense to some people, and some other people listen and go, "What is he talking about?" And then you explain it, and they go, "Oh, he just meant an open-ended triangle." Whereas I listen to that and I go, "I know what you mean, but I never would have thought to say it that way." We found two different ways to say the same message, and doubled the chances that the person listening is going to understand one of those two ways. So fantastic. Okay. We should be doing that with players.
This is a real quick tangent. My wife and I will play word games or whatever, and we'll look at a boggle board or whatever, and it's like bananagrams, and there'll be like 10 letters out there, and I will come up with 17 different words, and she comes up with 15 different words, and most of them are not the same because our brains work so different. And that's the bonus. Like, you and our brains work different, and it's a good thing.
Yeah. And please don't talk about like isosceles triangles with 12-year-old basketball players. Try and find a better cue that makes more sense than that. Unless it worked.
I mean, a tough one. Okay. So let's talk about the 5'5" player then, because so you talked about how having our feet real wide as a 5'5" player is not all that wide for a 7-footer, relatively speaking. What's the impact of that? Having your feet that wide, isn't that just wider is better? Isn't that positive?
Okay, so let's go with the wider is better idea to a point. And there are positives and negatives. There are trade-offs to both a narrow base and a wider base. And essentially what we're doing is we're trying to find the sweet spot where we get as much of the positives of both sides of the coin, and we eliminate as many of the negatives of both sides of the coin. So let's define what those are. If I have you put your feet in a relatively narrow position, how high could you jump? Is this a good position to jump out of if your feet are in a relatively negative position or narrow position?
Yeah.
Pardon me.
Yeah, I feel like I could jump pretty high with narrow feet.
Okay. On the Matt/Dave scale, let's acknowledge it's not actually going to be very high, especially in my case.
High for me,
but it will be high for me. Okay, so when you have your feet relatively narrow, you are in a very powerful position. You can generate a good amount of force. Sometimes that's going to be important. But as we've discovered, and we've talked about a few different ways now, that's not a very stable position. If we flip the coin and we go to the other side and we go really, really wide, then that's going to be a very stable position, especially laterally, especially side to side, but is not going to be very powerful. Imagine standing with your feet outrageously wide and trying to jump as high as you can. I could probably generate enough force if I'm really wide to get my feet an inch off the ground. That might be speaking a little bit more about the strength of my legs, but most of us are going to struggle to really generate force on outrageously wide feet. And so what we want to do is we want to find the sweet spot where we have a combination of the power generation of a narrow base and the stability of a wider base. And if we run the numbers on absorbing force, of absorbing sideways movement, stopping that, in other words, stopping negative energy, to create positive as we're shooting, the optimal position for having our feet is going to be the width of our hips or slightly wider than the width of our hips. I want the middle of your feet to be somewhere between 1.0 times the width of your hips or 1.5 times the width of your hips. When are you going to go more towards the 1.5 times? You're going to go more towards that when you're moving a lot. You've got a lot of force and you need stability more than you need power. When are you going to go towards the 1 time width of your hips? You're going to do that when power is more important than stability. Maybe you're not really moving. Maybe you're shooting a longer shot. Power becomes more important than stability. Then go slightly narrower. Stability is more important than power. Go a little bit wider. Does that make sense?
That makes sense to me, yes.
Okay. So then let's just acknowledge for a second. Okay, 1 to 1.5 times the width of your hips is sort of that optimal range that we're looking for, where we've got benefits of both. You can go and still be successful outside of that range. So you can go narrower than your feet and still make shots. We just have to understand it's going to be a lot harder for you to be stable. And so if you're not moving, if you're stationary, then you can get away with a narrow base. Or if you're barely moving, you can get away with narrow base. You can still luck into making a shot. If you're really moving and you have narrow base, it's just going to be harder. And we don't want to build habits that intentionally make shots harder or leave easiness on the table.
Very fair. You want to leaving easiness on the table is something we don't want to do.
It's really a Stevie Wonder song. It's like on one of the B-sides of one of his records, "Leaving Easiness." Sure. It's a boppy little ditty. Sorry,
one of my favorite songs.
I'm really tired.
No, this is great. This is not quite mini pod unhinged, but we're flirting a little. Okay, Coach Dave, let's take another break. We're going to do hammer action, and then we're going to cover the rest of the episode. How's that sound?
Love it.
Hey there, basketball fans. I'm NBA shooting coach Dave Love, and I've got exciting news just for you. Introducing my exclusive, free basketball shooting newsletter. It's packed with insights and techniques straight from the hardwood. Have you ever wondered how NBA players improve their shots? Or how you could get to the next level, whether you're a college player, a coach, or a budding youth player? My newsletter brings all this and more directly to your inbox. Each edition is a deep dive into the world of basketball shooting. I'll share some of the tips and ideas that I use with my NBA clients, tailored for every level of the game. But wait, there's more. Subscribers receive exclusive monthly discounts on my online products. From training videos to personalized coaching sessions, you'll get it all for a fraction of the price. And the best part of all, it's absolutely free to join. So what are you waiting for? Elevate your game and join a community of passionate players and coaches from around the globe. Signing up is easy. Just visit CoachDaveLove.com.
Coach, welcome back. All right, we're going to do an ATO here. I'm going to put 24 up on the thought clock. Please give us a concise look at an important item from the last segment.
To be in the sweet spot where you're getting the advantages of being as stable as possible and as powerful as possible, I want you to search for having your feet the width of your hips, either like the width of your hips or 1.5 times the width of your hips. Somewhere in that window will be the sweet spot that I wanted you to search for.
Great. We got a good look, just like you drew it up. We got a bucket. It wasn't pretty, but we got a bucket.
This is going to get silly.
Okay.
All right.
No.
The most sciencey episode we've done to this point, and potentially getting to be the silliest episode. But as we say, lock it in, stay professional. We're here.
Lock it in.
Get here.
Coach Dave, we're going to run into hammer action here. Hammer action is where you hammer home an actionable item from the topic that we're covering today. Let's get into it. Why does this matter outside of just like, oh, we should be balanced, that sort of general conversation?
Yeah, it help players understand that balance isn't just this word that we know the answer to the question. We've got to understand the concept. Balance is what helps us stop negative energy. We're going to be creating negative energy when we're moving on the floor. We've got to, as much as we can, be able to quickly stop that so that we can create positive energy out of the shots. If we don't stop it, then we've got to compensate for it with another negative move, and that's harder to do. And so what I would encourage coaches to do, I think balance can be really fun to work on. Like when I work on this particular habit, players end up smiling and giggling and laughing and having fun as they're working on this important sub skill within the shot. So how I want you to work on that is I want you to create the problem that you're trying to help the player solve. We can't work on balance unless a player gets off balance. You're not working on your balance by standing stationary. You're already on balance. What's the hard part of balance is getting it when you're out of control. So that's the problem. Create the problem. I do a ton of stuff where I push players, like literally put my hands on hip, hand on shoulder, and I push them to get them in an unstable position. They then have one step. That's the constraint on the drill. You've got one step to get your balance. Absolutely, players can and should 1-2-step in games. That's also a great workable solution, but it's just too easy to get your balance when you say you're working on your balance. So just give them one step. Both feet have to hit the floor at the same time. And you guys find a solution for me. Find a position that works. And they will, if they do this well, they will find feet outside of their hips as the solution for being off balance. And if they really have trouble getting stable, I would be guiding them towards just try and get a little bit wider. If they are able to be stable with narrow feet, that's my cue. I got to push harder. I got to create a bigger problem. They are solving the problem, but they're probably solving too easy of a problem, and they're not solving a game-like enough problem. So that would be one of the biggest ways that I work on that particular skill.
So you're trying to get their center of mass sort of towards the outside of their base of support to really try and help them work on that. So, okay, here's my question for you then, Dave. So do you find that this is a skill that as players work on this, they get better at it, or once they find an optimal solution, they just become better balanced? Is there like some kind of cross section there?
Ooh, good question. I'm not sure I have a great answer for that. I think the answer might be a little bit of both. But they quickly, like anybody that's a reasonably talented athlete, quickly figures this out. And so the mistake that I see a lot of players making is I say to them, okay, I want you to create a challenge, push each other, get each other off balance, and they don't push hard enough. That they're polite, they push delicately. And we never get to explore how to solve the big problem of getting off balance because we only create a little problem. So within 5 shots, within 5 times of pushing, you start at like a gentle push so that the player doesn't fall over and concuss themselves. But then on the next shot, you push a little bit harder. Within 5 shots, you can probably, as a grown adult, push a 15-year-old boy as hard as you can, and they will be able to stop this. And you haven't had to teach them how to do that. But I'll then circle back and I'll bring it to their attention how they solve the problem, which is probably wide feet, athletic body posture. And so that they know, okay, if you feel this, if you feel like you didn't control your body, what is the solution? What habit are you going to change in order to be able to solve it the next time? I think it's really important to circle back and point out the tool that they used if they unconsciously used the correct tool in the first place.
So you're saying that either their self-organization is going to help them solve the problem better than any real explanation you could give, or creating too difficult a situation. I kind of lost the second part there. You're
the
creating
first part,
too difficult.
absolutely right. The first part, yes. If you create the problem, they're probably going to self-organize and figure out how to solve it
better than you could explain it to them in the first place, or as well
the
as you could explain
explanation is going to be boring. They're going to tune that out. They're going to stop listening to the old man and probably not listen in the first place, and when we still have the problem. So give them the problem and encourage them to solve it by themselves, and then have them teach you what they did.
So turning it around on them again, we talked about in the last episode how did you feel about that? Like, again, this is another moment where that makes a ton of sense.
And all of this is just the player-led approach. That instead of me being the dictator and telling you how to do it as though I have all the right answers, you have none of the right answers. You need that just builds a greater dependency on the coach. When we can empower the player to solve the problem, that builds the dependency on them. And they're the only ones that are going to be on the floor in a game. So by us sounding smart on Instagram and giving the long explanation that makes us sound really smart for our listeners, all we've done is solve the problem for them. And when they get in a game, they turn to you, what's wrong? Only you're probably not there, and you're certainly not on the floor with them. And you can't solve that problem. We've got to teach them to solve it for themselves. But it just doesn't get a lot of followers on Instagram.
It's certainly less fun than shooting basketballs that are on fire. That's for sure. But will you win more basketball games while being in an optimal stance? Like, there is real science here that's determined, like, based on your center of mass, this is the appropriate width that your feet should be. And that's the important thing at the end of the day.
Yeah. And just understand that doesn't mean it's a rule. It's a guideline. And you can get away with a narrow stance if you're outrageously talented, or if the situation is really, really easy, or if you get lucky. But I'm greedy. I want to stack the odds in my favor. I want to give myself the best possible chance. And like, if you go, I have a blog on CoachDaveLove.com. I think it's skill acquisition, shot metrics, and blackjack ? And how, like, these ideas of skill acquisition and shot metrics just stack the odds in your favor. That does it guarantee you're going to win the hand of blackjack? No, they do not. You might still miss shots. You probably will if you're a human being. But they just give each shot a little bit better chance. Same idea with the balance. If you can be a little bit more stable, you've just increased the likelihood that you can make that one shot.
Dave, as always, just fantastic stuff. Any more thoughts on this before we close the episode?
Check out the blog for a little bit more. If you go on CoachDaveLove.com, look for the blog tab at the top, and then look for, what was the super sciencey title of this? I don't know if you have it there.
It is Quantifying Stability in Basketball, the science behind optimal stance widths.
Man, I want to punch the dude that wrote that in the nose. Oh yeah, that was me. We're going to find a far more workable, relatable title for the podcast. than that blog was necessarily written. But I'm sorry, sometimes I get a little nerdy. That's part of my personality.
Oh, buddy, I know that we're not talking about shot metrics, but I can't freaking wait. So it's coming soon. Coach Dave, you've told the people they can find your blogs at CoachDaveLove.com. What else can they find there?
Sign up for the newsletter, where I will send you a bunch of free information. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be rewriting all the initial information that I send you to reflect who I am as a coach a little bit better. Whereas a lot of the initial emails that you'll get are a reflection of the coach I was 2 or 3 years ago. So those are going to be updated. Then you get updates on the podcast. You get sales on online products. That's where you can go and buy a video shot analysis and get my feedback on your shot. And then if you want more free information, look for me on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube.
Lots of quality stuff on there. Honestly, great resources along with the podcast. Great opportunity to learn. And I am Matt Robertson. You can find me on LinkedIn. Crazy exciting stuff happening there, let me tell you. Not actually. I'm also Coach Matty Rob on Twitter. As a listener, thanks for sticking with us to the end. Please rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend. It all really helps. Let us know if we missed something, if we impacted you positively. And otherwise, we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Coach Dave Love Podcast. To stay up to date with our future episodes, please remember to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to sign up for Coach Love's free shooting newsletter on CoachDaveLove.com, and be sure to follow him on social media. You can find him at Coach Dave Love.